In the UK, it is very stormy and unpleasant outside at the moment, but thankfully I am inside and I'm watching some UU Circuit top 8 gaming between Starbitstorm and Just Drew. So, team-wise, on Drew's side, we've got the two dragons, and I want to say that it might be a kind of dragon spam with an offensive chomp, because between the Garg and the Bramblegast, which is an interesting pick, you've got your rocks and spikes covered, which frees up the chomp to take on a more offensive role. Then on Starbitstorm's side, we've got some pivots in the Zapdos and the low kicks, some Wincons in the Komodo and the Sinistra, and then Treads just being its Gen 8 Lando self, and a Blissey to make up what looks really like a quite normal balanced team as SBS teams go, which can be a bit out there. I do notice that it's quite slow. The fastest thing is the Treads, and so Latios is going to enjoy itself there, although it may be limited by the Blissey and the first impression in low kicks. Immediately, SBS has used more than 90 seconds to pick his lead, and Drew does have a few things that he could lead that makes it difficult for SBS. You could lead Garg and get rocks, you can go Torn and knock things in U-turn, you could lead your Bramble, you could lead your Chomp. You've got a lot of options. It's not the best sizzle game ever when there's a Zapdos and a Komodo and a Treads about, but if you can get it in and just get some early knockoffs spread around, then that can still be useful for you. As SBS passes the 2-minute mark yet to pick his leads, passes the 2.5-minute mark, in fact. He's, really not sure who to lead off with here. And Drew just has so many good potential leads on his team that you can see why, but he does eventually decide on Treads, who gets an awkward lead into the Chomp. You have got the Balloon, so you can maybe just stay in and set your rocks. Maybe Drew will respect the Ice Spinner and not want to just stay in and set his own hazards there. But if the Chomp is Scale Shot, then it can just break the Balloon and then be faster and threaten you out. And if this Chomp is rocks or spikes, then that will raise the question of what the Bramblegast and the Garg are doing. Maybe it could be something like a Curse or an Iron Defense Garg. Though the Sinistra is probably going to be Covert Cloak. They normally are. There's the Ice Spinner doing a lot of damage. As the Chomp elects to just stay in and Dragon Tail the Treads out straight away, which works because you can boot it out into something that's probably slower than you from how slow SBS's team is, which will then give you a hazard. It would just suck for you if you Dragon Tailed into the low kicks, who can then first impression to kill you. So here comes Garg on the Bliss as SBS just goes for the Seismic Toss to kill the Chomp if it did want to stay in and set its rocks. But now we've got a Garg who can... You can maybe just throw off Assault Cure and check if this is Covert Cloak or not. I think it will be. Yeah, there we go. But you know that now, you can work around it. And this could give you something like a Tornadus and a knocky, hurricane-y type vibes. Though maybe you don't want to knock it off if you've got Poltergeist on your Bramblegast. And yeah, here comes the Torn as SBS just calls it with the Zap. Although it also... words. Yeah, there comes the Bramblegast, which can't get Hurricaned with its Wind Rider, which is cool. But that's just going to give SBS the low kicks. And what I got kind of tripped up on my words about a second ago as the Taunt loses its AV is that the double to Zap from SBS, you're never just staying in and salt curing again on the Sinistra as it hits you or sets up or something like that, so it's quite a safe double to make, really. If the Zapdos is Heatwave, then it'll be quite offensively threatening. Though I suppose you can just sit on it with the Garg. Yeah, maybe Zapdos is more manageable the more I think about it, as Drew risks the Tornadus getting paralysed as well as losing its item on the Zap. But he gets away with it, and that lets him bring in who? Maybe Specs Latios could be quite good here if you are Specs. You could Garg and just get your rocks if that's what you are on the Garg. You could Chomp and get a Hazard, and SBS would have to land a Hurricane to kill you. Or you could Bramble and Spike. But Drew chooses Chomp. But the Chomp is getting there, lefties-wise. Managed to recover a decent bit so far and can probably get it back up to quite healthy. But Drew just goes for the rocks as he eats a Hurricane, which, yeah, I'm very impressed at how little that did. The Chomp has surely got speed, so I'm not sure exactly how much speed it is versus HP and Spadef to eat that. But Drew gets out of that very favourably with rocks up and a Chomp that's still alive. And Bramble makes for quite a good spin blocker in that if you take a knock, then you can just get yourself strength zapped straight back up. Here's Torn as SBS calls that with a very nice Volt Switch. As you've really not got a reason to let your Chomp go there. Especially when we've seen that it's Dragon Tail, meaning that Earthquake plus maybe something like a Protect or a Spikes, you can't really do anything meaningful to the Zapdos before sacking your Chomp, so Drew is sensible in preserving the sack if nothing else. There's low kicks. And first impression is really free here. Like, you want to go Garg, you just get your first impression on your U-turn and it has to recover and... Okay, maybe it doesn't have to recover, but probably still wants to rather than just ineffectually Salt Curing into the Sinistra. But U-turn into Sinistra here is really free. Or you could go Komodo and get your rocks if that is your rocker. Then we might be looking at an Omni Booster of a Komodo rather than just a more defensive one. Here comes Treads, who Drew does go for the Salt Cure rather than the Recover, and I think the Treads is SBS banking on a Recover, not wanting to Salt Cure. Though I suppose you get rocks, you get Salt Cure into the Sinistra, it's a bit low, it probably has to Strength Sap. You kind of can just set up a free switch into the Sinistra that probably wants to Strength Sap itself back up. But here are the rocks on the Bramble, and you don't want to spin block with your Sinistra because you just get blown up by a Poltergeist, which is quite awkward. So what do you do here to discourage a spin as SBS? You're really, as Drew, quite free to either get a Spike or get a spin, whatever you prefer, really. You could spin to just help enable your Torn, but it's already lost its AV, and that he was willing to risk the Torn getting paralysed on the Zapdos does suggest that he doesn't really value his Torn that much. Difficult turn, and yeah, your Treads hasn't got recovery of any kind, and if it stays in here then it's dying to the Salt. Okay. Ice Spinner, kind of mid-ground from SBS, getting some damage. That works. The Latios is going to be limited into... I think it might just about have enough left to get 2 more switch-ins. Sometimes when the percentages are that close, Showdown's interface can be a bit funny about it. But here's just another first impression plus U-turn, and this time the Garg is a lot more forced to recover, if that is what Drew wants to bring in. You could just sack your Chomp and then get a free switch in, but Drew prefers to keep his Mons, which is generally quite sensible. You could be cheeky and go for a knock here, but on the recover, but SBS doesn't do that as he goes Komodo. And we might be looking at a substitute Komodo. Would be one of the obvious things here. Or you could just Omni Boost and take the Sulkyo on the chin. Yep, there's the substitute. As... oh, the Garg curses, okay. I want to say that you have to curse a lot as the Garg to be able to break the Komodo sub with, like, a body press or an earthquake. And so as Komodo, you're quite free to just Clang or DD or SD into Scale Shot or whatever it is that you want to do, as Komodo's always been really, really versatile. Now it has Scale Shot in its arsenal too, but this is just an Omni Booster, as we're probably looking at Clang plus Drain Punch. Yeah, there's the Drain Punch, getting all of that back, and that's going to help enable you to Omni Boost again. But SBS doesn't want to do that, he wants to just go straight for another Drain, as we see in Earthquake from Drew. I was wondering about just getting a cheeky Salt Cure in somewhere, when you don't want to sub, when you know that the Earthquake will break your sub, but SBS goes for and doesn't get a flinch. This is a Komodo that would enormously struggle into something like a Zapdos. But you can go for your crits and flinches and get yourself healthy again. Okay, well SBS doesn't like his odds of flinching or critting his way through, as, yeah, there's the Salt Cure that you can kind of just fish for when you've shown that you'll break the Komodo sub, but Komodo and Garg both come out of it on very high health, living to see another day, and Drew just gets a very sensible spike. They'll help limit the Komodo a bit, and can't be removed when SBS has a dead Treads. Yeah, Hazard Stack plus the Bramble as your spin blocker is quite interesting from Drew. Though I am now really curious of what is your Bramble? Because I kind of saw setting a spike as its main appeal. But given that the Chomp is spikes, Drew is clearly doing something else with it, so I'm hoping that we'll be able to see what that is this game. Here comes Torn, Knock, take the boots. That's quite useful when you can't remove the hazards. Yeah, this is definitely looking like advantage Drew so far. Though the Komodo is still there and still very dangerous, and if you do want to just try and 1v1 it with the Garg, then there is always the chance that you get crit and flinched down. But here is the Garg now, on the freest Volt Switch in the world. It really sucks to lose your boots when the Chomp is dead, because you could just Volt all over everybody, especially the Scizor and the Torn, for the entire game, but now you can't really do that, because you've got to just stop to roost a lot more than you'd like to. But here's Sinistra, and yeah, I mean, you're taking 25. It's just going to have to strength zap way too often, and that's going to give Drew the room that he needs to play around it. Yeah, difficult. Maybe you can get away with a match of Gotcha here to get a bit of HP back. Here's the Torn. as yet we do see the Matcha Gotcha, which gets you a really piddly amount of HP back. Another option there is that you could do something like Calm Mind into Terror, though I don't know what the exact spread on the Sinister is, even if you can assume there's the power. And that being paralyzed is also just going to enable Sinister, because it's not recovering when the rocks are up, or it's not recovering much with its regen. And so now the Taunt doesn't work as a Sinister switch anymore, because you can Calm Mind on the switch and then kill it. Here's a Boot Sizzle. And, well, Scizor is going to be delighted to see A, a Zapdos that is low and has lost its boots, and B, a Komodo that is offensive and doesn't have something like Flamethrower for it. And here's a sword. Oh, Healing Wish, that's really cool. Okay. Yeah, I did not expect that. That's a really cool bring. You're probably looking at just enabling the Komodo to sort of break early and then come in again and get Healing Wish back up. But here you've got to use it to not lose to the Scizor. And, I mean, that's really cool. You've gotten out of the immediate danger, but it's also kind of worrisome because the Scizor is at full and will have chances to do that again. And unless you want to stop and roost, then your Zap is going to be coming in lower next time. So you've got out of the immediate danger, but you're still very threatened by the Scizor. And what do you want to do here? You probably got a Heat Wave if you've got it, which isn't a lovely thought into what's probably going to be Garg, but I don't think there's really much you can do about that. Drew is getting very low on his timer. He's Terra Normal Scizor, okay, as it eats the Heat Wave, SDs again, and now it can Quick Attack. And I don't know the calc off the top of my head. I want to say the Zap drops would probably be why Drew's going for it. And you've also got to avoid the static as Drew, and you've got to stay out of range of the low kick's first impression. What do you want to do as SBS? I think you probably want to just Volt, in that if you live, you get the damage, and then you kill this with the low kicks. Yeah, Terra Normal Quick Attack is cool. It's not unheard of. People have definitely done it before, but it's not the expected Scizor set. And I think it has kind of caught SBS a little bit off guard here. But the Zap Terra steals to eat the Quick Attack before vaulting out. And that's also a nice Terra steal because although you are taking the Spike now, you're taking resisted rocks for 6, 12 for Spike, 18, rather than 25 when you come in. And yeah, SBS, by using the Terra, doesn't have to sack anything, even if the Zap is quite low. Gets his low kicks back in. You are going to have to find a chance to get that roosted back up. Though equally, the Scizor is so low now that you can just kind of stay in and hit it with any of your guys. So maybe the Zap doesn't urgently have to be roosted back up. You have also Terra'd into weak to Salt Cure, which is a bummer, as SBS gets the sub on the Latios sack, as it's not on quite enough HP to get one more switch in. And then he's just going to get a Drain Punch on the Garg, which goes straight for the Curse. And I think at the +1 defense, you should be eating another one. I was going to say as SBS, you could just go for an Iron Head flinch there, but he doesn't think so. And the Garg is going to get recovered up. Drain Punch, 36 again, all the way back up to healthy, more curses. And this Garg is down to 3 recovers. So if you can remain unsalt cured as SBS, then you're probably just winning here. Of course, the Garg can curse more freely than you can Clang, because you're losing the HP. And so that is going to let the Garg kind of stay a step or two ahead of you in terms of its amount of boosts. And you're probably going to get your sub broken here, unless Drew does... Okay, he recovers. So you could even Clang again here, and I think a neutral Earthquake shouldn't break your sub. Yeah, I mean, now that you're on equal, you can just... I was going to say keep clanging, but SBS, understandably, wants to get HP back, which you can't really blame him for. So you can Clang again here. Your sub's going to get broken by the second hit, but you can sub again, and that one shouldn't be broken. And Drew... Right, well, Drew says GG. They might be a little bit ahead, as they're clicking quite fast. Komodo on just enough HP to get another sub up, but doesn't want to. And yeah, we see the kind of cheeky just Drain Punch again on a turn that you don't want to be Salt Curing into a sub that you'll do nothing to. And as SBS says GG, he also says just give me some time, won't be long, which is going to mean that I'm going to have to flounder around to entertain you for a minute or two, because while it might be quite cold in the UK, hell has not yet frozen over, so I'm not going to edit it. And there's the Ironhead. And I believe now we're going to just watch a Komodo kill a lot of other things. And so, very tragically, this game ends without learning what the Brambleghast was meant to be doing, other than it has Shadow Sneak, which bounces off a +4 Komodo, and said +4, +6 Komodo. And said Komodo, +1,000,000 everything, does not care about its Salt Cure and is just gonna smash its way through. But yeah, that game really just swung on its head from the Healing Wish from the Bliss, which is a really cool bring. Blissey is normally only found on stall in UU, and it's quite unusual to see it on this kind of balance, but SBS has spotted that with the Healing Wish, it can support this kind of team a lot better. On stall, A, Healing Wish would just be weird, and B, there isn't really room for it, because you've really got to have soft-boiled, heal bell, seismic toss, and then you either want to be spreading Thunder Waves around, or you want something to hit Ghosts, a kind of flamethrower, ice beam type option, or Calm Mind, so that you can Calm Mind alongside things like Latios, Sinistra, those kinds of guys. But Heal Bell is a lot less essential on a balance, which frees up the slot for the surprise Healing Wish, which was enough to get out of jail free against the Sizzle that Drew probably thought had just won. And then having avoided that, Komodo was able to do Komodo things. Good morn. And it's an awkward one on Substitute Komodo in that you really struggle to fit enough coverage once you've got the sub and the clang. And yeah, Drain Punch plus Ironhead, well, it hits you, your fairies, and kind of your ghosts, but it's nowhere near perfect coverage. And if Drew had something like a Zapdos, then you really don't want to be just ineffectually Ironheading and draining into that. But I don't know if this was SBS going, Drew never brings Zapdoses, or anything like that, or if he just lucked out, really, on having the exact right coverage for the job. SBS is, of course, very known for his very in-depth scouting abilities, and so the Drain Punch plus Ironhead being the correct bring could quite possibly be the result of that. Yeah, it was a really good game in my opinion, a very swingy one. But I'm just really curious about the Bramble. I mean, I can assume it's Rapid Spin to just kind of support your own hazard stack while still having removal for your AV Tornadus, but I don't have to speculate anymore because here is Gaming 2 as SBS, same as he did last round, is loading a Psychic Terrain HO. I can't remember if it's the same one or not. Whereas Drew has got more of a balance. Rabombi is cool. I like that mon. Maybe with something like offensive Metagross under webs. If you find a way to keep the webs up, then that can limit SBS a lot, especially the Teapot and the Ogerpon. The Hawlucha obviously doesn't mind, but SBS has got the spin on his treads, and he's got Tidy Up on the Chinchino, so he has a lot of options for limiting the hazards. And we see a Metagross lead from Drew. I definitely think the Metagross is going to be very important in that it can live a hit off, I want to say, everybody not named Poltegeist. Ivy Cudgel there. That's weird. You'd think if you were staying in you'd go for a knock, but evidently not. I don't know what that Ivy Cudgel was about, in that if you're gonna switch, you're probably going Chomp, and Ivy Cudgel isn't really getting you anywhere against that either. The obvious leads for SBS are Indeedee and Treads. Unless it was something really wild, like a just Spikes lead Ogerpon, which probably would have just gone for it there. So you've probably got to respect the possibility of Bullet Punch as SBS, but it's just a tough one of, if you go Indeedee and you get Heavy Slam, you probably just die. So maybe you want something like Treads in to grab your rocks? Although it's an awkward one where if Drew wants to just force the Tidy Up, then you're going to have to tidy up your own rocks. Yeah, I don't know what that first turn is about. But Drew's taking time now. Maybe SBS is kind of going, you don't want to take damage on the Metagross when it's going to have to eat something. I wonder if the Metagross is something cool like Colberberry, which would mean that it wouldn't really care about taking a knock so much and would happily exchange that for the HP on the Ogerpon. I suppose you can be kind of laissez-faire about your Ogerpon when you've got the Indeedee in the back, because you can Healing Wish your... There's a Power Whip. Helmet? Not Helmet. That's interesting, and yeah, sets SBS up quite nicely for more Ivy Cudgeling. And so now you've got half damage on this. I believe the Aloe from Drew, by the way, is just a kind of catch-all. You want to go Treads, you want to go Indeedee, whatever. I'm going to go Aloe and I'm going to flip on you and I'm going to have the momentum, which isn't something you want to be conceding when you've got your side terrain. So maybe the kind of reckless Ogerpon behavior is in the hope of, with the idea of just Healing Wishing it back up. Definitely a big shame for Drew that, okay, well, evidently it's not with the hope of Healing Wishing it back up, but here comes Treads as you've got the damage on the Metagross, and the Aloe, I was gonna say, it's gonna need to come in and get its regen before it can live a hit off the Lucha, but it's already found the opportunity to do that. Unless you want to just stay in with your Treads and hit this to keep it in range. But here's Chinchino. Which I believe may be to try and keep out the Chomp, as a flip on the Treads into a Chomp who gets its rocks will be rough, but here comes the Chomp. Clearly not caring about getting triple axle, potentially this could be Rocky Helmet, and so then you really don't want to be using a repeated contact move into it. Yeah, I'm kind of struggling to wrap my head around this game so far. I think SBS might just be going all in on a win with Hawlucha, and so getting half damage on the Metagross is very important there. As from full health, it'd live a +2 hit. I think now as SBS, you've got to be really careful not to let the Aloe get a wish back to the Metagross. I think it's very hard to come back if you do that. But also, I mean, you've got a powerful enough team that you probably aren't giving Aloe loads and loads of room for doing that. But Drew just scouts the triple axle, and in doing so gets a million HP back on his Aloe. Is going to absorb a Bullet Seed, which I think you just about eat, unless one of them crits, which it doesn't, and flips back out again. So, Boots Treads, makes sense. You've got to give the rocks away unless you want to go hard Teapot, which would be an interesting decision. And SBS doesn't want to do that. He wants to just smack the treads, but gives up the rocks in doing so. Okay, well, there's another spin. Now we have a very fast treads on our hands. This is tough, because you've got to get your Cyterrain for your Lucha or your T-Bot to do anything. But if you go in DD, you're just kind of giving so much space to the treads that can get its rocks up, and then your Sash is broken on the T-Pot. What are we looking at here? Are we just trading probably like 80% on your treads to kill his? Difficult. You aren't getting damage on things as SBS. You've got a very low Aloe that is going to have to come in numerous times and probably not even take a hit to flip out. It's going to have to just keep coming in to be able to live hits off anything, and even then, unless you get Scald Burn, you're not doing loads into a Lucha with your Aloe. The Metagross is on half, so Lucha will kill it at +2. Drew just terrors his treads and blows up SBS's treads. You've got to Terra Ground to get the kill there, which makes sense. Oh, and it's Ice Spinner as well to kill the terrain. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, into Ice Spinner treads. It's a very good bring from Drew, because SBS bought this last time. And so, just having that kind of insurance against someone that could well bring Cyterrain again is really sensible. And so all you can do, you gotta just go hard into it to get your Lucha activated at all. But then, after 2 spins, even with Unburden, you're not faster, and the treads is able to just tidy up. So that's the thing about Cyterrain, is you can load into really, really hard matchups, and it's something that when you catch someone out with it, there can be nothing they can do about it. But Drew isn't caught out, as having seen the Cyterrain bought twice in the last round, he's got his things into it. He's got Metagross, he's got the treads. Very difficult, as a bunch of the Mons don't even have to come out. I'm not sure, again, what the initial Ivy Cudgel was about. And yeah, I mean, it works out for you there. You catch the Aloe covering the Indeedee and the treads, but even then, the the aloe could easily have been Rocky Helmet, and then your Ogerpon's just dead. And, like, then what are you doing? That was a strange game. And I can really see here being quite reticent to go in DD, which might just get blown up if Drew stays in and hits. But I want to say that Treads would have reasonably covered anything in the... Even if it earthquakes, you wouldn't have died. Yeah. Bizarre. And once the Treads got the 2 spins, meaning that a weak armored teapot or a Lucha that's got its unburden still won't outspeed it, then it was just really rough, and Drew does well to identify that, okay, let's just terror and kill this Treads, and then I can just keep on ice spinning, and then if SBS can't keep the terrain, then he can't do anything. Yeah, if he can't keep the terrain, then you can't, through any silliness with the last 2 Mons, just kind of cheese you or pull back some kind of improbable win. And while if the teapot just came in hard, then it could have lived a hit, got its weak armor, and shell smashed up. It needs to have the terrain, because without it, it just gets bullet punched by the Metagross. And so Drew identifies really well in the end game of how can I prevent any silliness from happening, and the answer to that is to just ice spin until the cows come home. I do in these breaks often espouse the importance of staying hydrated, and that remains very important even when things are cold and miserable and it's easier to miss and forget about. It's also especially important when you're sat in front of a laptop talking for the best part of an hour. Well, we've again heard a give me some time between the two of them, which means that even someone as experienced in self-indulging monologues as I am begins to run out of things to say. I've already done the whole bit about editing and hell freezing over, so I can't even really rehash that to you. So for other things to talk about, Drew's avatar, that's very cute. It's the Gibbles avatar from SCL, which I believe Drew's team did win, with Drew supporting the UU and the PU. Whereas SBS is rocking the clown. There are much worse players than SBS that have customs, so hopefully he will be able to secure one sooner or later. My trusty custom, my Breakdancer and my Gliscor, I did very little to earn. I was pretty hard carried to it, really. Shout out to the UK World Cup team. And that's the interesting thing about customs, that they kind of, I mean, they look cool. They don't really say that much, because you can get carried to one, you can work very, very hard and be very good, but either you or your team fall short at the last second and don't quite make it, and then you don't have one. And now I'm really kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel for what I can tell you about. I'm not sure what the Ogerpon was, or why it was the lead. I've seen Trailblaze on side terrain teams because you just get fast and then you're very hard to revenge kill. With a lead, maybe you want to be encoring and taunting and doing some kind of disruption there. You could have got a spike if you were that into a non-treads lead, but I don't think it would be spike on a team that is so reliant on keeping hazards off for itself and has tidy up as a way of doing that. Cinccino is an interesting pick on these kinds of teams in that it sucks, but it has just about the most reliable hazard clearing in the tier, in that we don't really have much in the way of spinners. Treads is the main one, but there's lots of spin block, there's lots of random Terra Ghost, whereas Mandibuzz does not fit on this kind of team at all, and so you do kind of have to turn to Cinccino if you want to get the hazards gone, with the additional benefit of making things drastically easier if you run into just random Aurora Veil. And so it's one of those mons that it's kind of like Torkoal, where it sucks, but it does something that nobody else can do. Which is an interesting genre of mon. And as I was about to start waffling about additional options like Espeon instead for keeping the hazards off, I don't need to do that, as we get Game 3 and SBS is reusing his very successful Komodo team. This time Drew's got a Cresselia and a Zapdos, both of whom this Komodo is going to struggle to hit. And this time I'm immediately saying I think it's going to be uphill for SBS, because you also don't have the surprise factor of that Healing Wish anymore. You do have your Sinistcha into a Garg again, and I do think the Sinistcha just looks quite good in general. So you have got that going for you. Whereas on Drew's end, the Zap is really, really nice in that it Volt Switches on everybody apart from the Treads that it Heat Waves. The Quack, if it's got the right moves, is threatening. Something like Swords Dance plus Ice Spinner or Knock would be really good. And you've not got to do something clunky like slot Rapid Spin onto it, because you've got a Treads alongside it to do that much better. I'm not sure what the Cress is going to be. Maybe Drew's the one with kind of shenanigans around Healing Wish Lunar Dance this time. And Quaquaval is a cool pick. It's always been good, but it's been a little bit kind of forgotten about because of the new toy syndrome of the 76 mons that dropped into UU at the start of January. So it's nice to see it here, and it probably can find chances to set up on, say, the low kicks or the Blissey or maybe the Treads. And so Drew's just leading to try and get his rocks. You've seen that the Sinistcha isn't boots. Rocks are nice to have. Who knew? While SBS is just U-turning about. You could just go Zap and fish for paralysis, but it's probably not really necessary to immediately go for. I think you probably just get your rocks when you've led with a Treads with that intent. Okay, Drew goes straight for the Knock, which is interesting, because if you do just land that on the low kicks on a kind of slightly greedy U-turn, now the low kicks is going to be very limited by rocks, because low kicks is a mon that needs its boots because it wants to be just coming in and out constantly all game to first impression and U-turn out on things. And you have already got a Zapdos, which discourages it from U-turning, but also doesn't enjoy losing its boots. But between the Zap and if you'd landed that knockoff on the low kicks, then it would be pretty much entirely shut down. But Zap losing its boots, that sucks for SBS. It limits your ability to do things like come in on the Quack to... Things like coming in on Quack and Treads to just fish for paralysis gets a lot harder, and here we have the problem with Covert Cloak Sinistra. You just get worn down and you find yourself just having to strength zap a lot more frequently than you'd like to. But Garg is a monolithic pain, and so sacrifices have to be made. So here's a Moongus, who is not an enjoyer of the recent OU sleep ban, which also bans sleep from everything lower down. I believe they're playing in Ubers so they can still sleep for this week, but it'll be banned after that, and it really does feel like Amoongus was just kind of an unfortunate bit of collateral to the sort of OU mostly Darkrai and kind of things like Valiant hypnosising everybody. But here's a Zap on the Blissey, and you're going to vault into who? Probably Quack. But Drew prefers Garg. Oh right, I didn't even process that the Blissey was yet to move. Quack would have been very stupid then. Garg makes a lot more sense to just deny any kind of status silliness. And Sulkia, I mean, it sucks that you just have to hit into the teapot, but between the rocks and the 10%, you're whittling it down and you can get switches on it having to strength zap. But here SBS just match gotchas, gets a little bit of HP back, and also gets a really nice burn on the zap. Not a good game to be named Zapdos, as one has lost its boots and one has got burnt. And the parallel Zapdoses just kind of want to be annoying on Drew's side, annoying the low kicks and the Komodo, and on SBS's side, annoying the Quack, and both of them are just limited in their ability to do that now. But here comes the Zap, vault straight out, and yeah, losing your boots just sucks because now you're not able to vault around freely nearly so consistently. I was going to say, do we want a Komodo here? But his Treads. And do you want... I don't think it's good value to incur a Sulkia for getting a spin on the Mon that can just do it again. But the rocks are nice, and if you want to give up loads of health, then you can get a knock here, which is also helpful. Whereas on the Garg end, you don't really want to be taking an Earthquake or losing your lefties. Though it isn't the best Garg game in the world when there's a Sinistra that can abuse you, and a Komodo, who we saw last time, does eventually 1v1 you. So maybe you could be a bit reckless with your Garg if you really want something like an Earthquake here. Between that and the Sulkia, just kind of somewhere between massively hurting and killing the Treads. But Drew doesn't think so. Here's Zap on the Sinistra, who also makes sense as a anything Garg wants to do absorber. But again, this is just the thing with being not boots and not lefties. Every time you come in and you don't have the space, you're just losing more HP. And then on a strength zap, Drew can just do whatever he wants. And whatever he wants is double Quack on the Blissey. Which makes sense, because you're never just match-a-gotchaing into a zap. Like, if anything, you Shadow Ball, which would suck to take, but isn't the end of the world. But Sinistra is not a Bramblegast. It does not enjoy taking Hurricanes. And we see a U-turn from the Quack, which is odd. It's not boots or lefties. So maybe it's pads? It could be pads if you're risking a U-turn. Or it could just be... I mean, Scarf Quack is bizarre, but I've seen it and used it before. Shout out to Rash, who made me that team. But we see just how much Zap hates losing its boots, that now it's got a roost. It can't just vault out on whoever wants to come in, and who does want to come in? You could do something like Garg, though it is quite slow. You get the Sinister down to about half, and then do what you want. Or you can Treads and threaten a spin. Not spin, sorry, an Ice Spinner, that's the word. And the Zap does die, okay. Well, if your Quack isn't Protective Pads, then you're gonna enjoy that a lot. U-turn does mean it's probably not a setup Quack, and it probably can't fit your kind of knockoffs and Ice Spinners and what have you. Which is probably good news for SBS, because that would be really hard to deal with. But then losing your Zap is quite bad news. Very much advantage Drew here, as... yeah, I mean, just SBS hasn't really made very much progress. The Zapdos is burnt, which is... actually, yeah, the Zapdos being burnt is really nice, and maybe if your Komodo has the right Terror, then you can find the space to sub an Omni Boost, and then not just get killed by the Zapdos and find the time and space. That is a really good knockoff for Drew, as he sees that SBS has to strength Zap, so he can just take the Cloak, and now you always have Salt Cure into the Sinister, which is going to limit its ability to beat you, and is also going to really increase the effectiveness of going Garg on things like low kicks, because SBS just no longer has a Salt Cure absorber, other than getting a free switch in on his Komodo and going for a sub. So we vault out on the Sinister into a Moongus, who, coming in like that, is probably wanting to clear Smog, but it can't, because SBS goes straight for the Shadow Ball, and 2-hit KOs it. So now you're in a bit of a sticky spot as Drew. If you want to be funny with pivoting about, you can go into Garg, take a resisted Shadow Ball, go back into a Moongus, take Rocks and a quad resisted match a Gotcha, and then probably have regened enough health, even after that, to live the next Shadow Ball. But it's not reliable, and I don't love having to go for that. Yeah, suddenly this gets kind of funky. And Drew does just opt to let go of his Amoonguss to get in the Cress, who... what is the Cress looking to do? It might trick a Scarf onto the Sinister, and then it'll just it'll lock into Shadow Ball and lose to Garg. It Terror Electrics and Calm Minds itself. Okay, so if you've got stored power, then you will eventually win the Calm Mind War, and as SBS goes Bliss on the Terror Electric, maybe he was looking to Thunderwave it or something with the Bliss, but now he knows he can't. And so he just starts setting up the Komodo, terroring out of taking the stored power, and you're losing HP, but you are gaining Spadef. And then because your attack is getting boosted and the Cress's defense isn't, you can get good HP back with Drain Punch, because Cress has 1,000,000 HP. But the Terror Electric Thunderbolt is going to do a lot. Yeah, this is an interaction that I've never seen before between these two, and the Komodo is going to come out of it on top, as Drew doesn't find a Paralysis or a crit, and then Drain Punch does have enough in it to kill the Garg, meaning that you don't even get Salt Cure, and you sub to just lower the Quack's defense with the CC so that you can even harder kill it with Drain Punch. Drew goes Zap to see if he can find a full power from the static, which he doesn't. SBS subs because the Zap can't break it, and even if he gets fully paralyzed, he's behind a sub at plus 1,000,000 defense. And so for the second round in a row, SBS brings the same team twice, but wins with it both times, as the sub-clan Komodo just has too much. Yeah. Wow. The press from Drew was cool, but just a shame that it terrored out of its resistance to Drain Punch was really pivotal. And so that lets SBS get way more HP back. And I see why he wanted to, at the time, to beat the Sinister and not just get Shadow Balled through. But that opened him up to the getting Komodo'd, which is a really cool interaction, and not one that I expect SBS had in mind when making the team, because that would just require the most insane foresight that you can possibly imagine, but one that he's able to really use to his advantage here, forcing the terror out of the Cress to allow the Komodo to get enough regen to beat it. Had the Cress not had to terror, you could still terror your Komodo to avoid out of taking stored power, and then you can just go for the flinches with Ironhead, but you're not getting the huge amounts of HP back that you were getting, and it's nowhere near so reliable. Anyway, congratulations to SBS. Thanks for watching. See ya.